Good Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock in time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. Plenty of Browns roster to talk about, draft done. And now the question is, does Andrew Berry have a piece or two to add to this roster as they get ready for mini camp and, rookie mini camp, then training camp, but still some free agents out there. We begin with some news, not really a surprise. Andrew Berry making it official. The Browns pick up the fifth-year option for left tackle Jedrick Wills. He will make $14.175 million in 2024. That tweet coming from Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegraph, as well as BrownsZone.com. Let's welcome in Scott Petrak. And Scott, kind of a divided fan base with Jedrick Wills. The reaction would be, if not Jedrick Wills, who's playing left tackle week one?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, Dave, you can always find the flaws in the guys you have. And I know that Jedrick Wills is not a perfect player. I know that he doesn't always finish. I get the PFF grades. But is there another guy out there that you can bring in and would be better? And I don't know. I think the answer is no. I think it'd be really hard to find a guy that's physically more talented than Wills. He has really good feet and good size. To me, it's just a matter of fully tapping into that potential. The Browns feel he made strides last season. He's going to work with Bill Callahan, the respected line coach, again. And they just hope that over the next 2 years that he becomes, he fulfills that potential. And, he has 2 more years to do it. It's not overly costly, just at $14 million for 2024. So I think the move makes sense. The only interesting part of it is that Andrew Berry refused to answer the question Saturday, and then they do it Monday morning.
Yeah, and was asked the question repeatedly over and over and didn't want to answer it. The other thing is, and let's take a look at the Browns draft. My other point will be made clearer here. So this is how they laid out. Didn't have a pick till the third round. They go Cedric Tillman, big wide receiver from Tennessee. Ika, the defensive tackle. Then Dawand Jones, a very, very large man that plays offensive tackle, but definitely a developmental kind of guy. And then McGuire, a guy that was attached to the Browns as a D-end. You heard Dorian Thompson-Robinson is a potential developmental quarterback, and you see cornerback, center, more interior offensive line. Dane Brugler tweets this out. Browns didn't pick until 74 and still landed 5 players from his top 100. Love the value of their draft haul. And, Scott, I guess, we were talking a little bit before we went on the air, and it's so hard when you don't have a pick before the third round, but these were guys that, you saw attached to the Browns, and you can certainly understand some of the traits.
Yeah, there's no doubt. You see the size, right? That was the thing that stood out the most to me. But you also see guys who you can forecast where they would fit, whether it's in 2023 or even further down the road. When you talk about, Luke Whippler, the center, right? How does he fit? Could he step in and replace Nick Harris as the backup this year? And then maybe a couple of years later, take over for Ethan Posick. So you can kind of forecast where guys might fit on the depth chart. And it doesn't seem like any of these picks to me were a stretch. I think you can question certain things about each player, but they all make sense to me.
Yeah, and, keep in mind, when you get to the third, fourth, and fifth round, there are always traits. But, Andrew Berry had said they're looking for specific traits, and you can see them in all of them. These are guys that if they develop the way the Browns hope they can, they might be able to come in and replace more expensive options, not this year, but maybe next year, the year after.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think you see that with Cedric Tillman, like I said, the center position. Even a corner, you got Cam Mitchell. I don't know how he would fit, but the Browns have 3 corners. He just adds to that pile. I think you're right about the traits, David, and I do think, like you referenced, it's important to remember they didn't have a pick in the first 2 rounds, right? So, I think you just focus on, as a fan, you probably focus on, okay, here's, Cedric Tillman, and here's Siaki Ika, and then you say, well, can they do something right away? And yes, they should be in the rotations at their spots, but you have to remember that they were, in fact, third-round picks and not, taking the first couple of rounds. So I think you have to manage expectations.
Well, Andrew Berry talked about taking Siaki Ika as well as Cedric Tillman, wide receiver at 74.
Big size receiver, ton of strength, really consistent hands. Very productive when he was on the field for Tennessee, and we're excited to add him to the mix. Workmanlike attitude, real quiet. I think he'll fit in really nicely with our group. And then Siaki, he's another player that we really identified early in the scouting process. I think the first thing that stands out is his size, but he actually moves pretty well, especially for like a bigger defensive tackle. We saw him as more scheme versatile, even though he played in an odd front at Baylor. And we really enjoyed our time that we spent with him this spring when he visited us, earlier this month.
And again, those are, being honest, he's telling you what attracted the Browns to each of these guys, and it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I did think it's interesting when he talked about Ika and just, how they'd use him. The attacking thing, that's not what you picture from a guy that's, 350 pounds, right? You think of him as a two-gap guy, but yet that's not how, at least they're saying they plan to use him. They want to get him up the field and attack. And that's why it feels that's why it's interesting to me, because that's not like the body type you would think of. That's not how he played at LSU. I know he did more of that after he transferred to Baylor. But I thought it was really fascinating to hear Andrew talk about it, and then obviously the Jim Schwartz Ferrari phone call.
Yeah, and again, we'll hear from that a little bit later, but it's you get the idea of at least what they think these guys project as. The other thing that's interesting, we found out Browns are working to move the start of training camp this summer to Greenbrier in West Virginia. At least, and keep in mind they get to camp earlier because they're playing in the Hall of Fame game a week earlier down in Canton. I think it's a great idea. They need to get away and get things going because they need to hit the ground running.
Yeah, you know what? I have some mixed feelings on this. I get that they're going to practice in Berea and fans will be able to go, and it might even be the same number of practices in the past. But it also feels like, you've been out there a ton of times, Dave. There's a bunch of fans that like to go every day. They go as much as they can, and you're kind of robbing them of maybe 8 practices. So, I feel that. I think it's tougher for the media, right? You got to go down to West Virginia. There's, you know how the media is. It's tough to spend 10 days somewhere. So from those perspectives, I have kind of quite mixed feelings about it. But I certainly understand Kevin Stefanski wanting to break up the monotony of an even longer training camp, wanting that bonding element, right? When he was in Minnesota for all those years as an assistant, they would go away. They'd go to college. I think they stayed in the dorms. And he thought that was a really good bonding environment. And it's just tougher to kind of manufacture that in Berea when not everybody stays in the hotels. You can only be in the building for so long. Here at the Greenbrier, everyone will be on the same property 24 hours a day for like 8 days, or it might even be a little longer than that. So he's hoping to improve the team chemistry, which we all know was an issue last year.
And you've added a bunch of new pieces. We saw the draft, the free agents. So that extra preseason game, while the game itself doesn't give you any advantage, the week of practices leading up to that game, I think that gives you a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Coaches want as much practice time as they can get right, but I think it's a balancing act then. It's Stefanski's going to take him to the Greenbrier. Before they play the Eagles in the preseason, he's going to take them to Philly for a couple days, because you don't want guys, kind of beating their heads against each other, against the wall in Berea for, 6 weeks or whatever it would be. That can kind of have it's almost like addition by subtraction, right? You reach a point of diminishing returns.
Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we will hear from Cedric Tillman as well as Siaki Ika. Sports4CLE talking Browns draft. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. Browns took Cedric Tillman with their first of 2 third-round picks. Tillman, a big receiver. 6'3", 213 is what he's listed at. He feels that size is an asset to him on the football field.
I think it makes a big difference, honestly. One-on-one, balls in the air, having my body, it's easy for me to box guys out. But also, in a blocking game, a lot of guys can't go toe-for-toe with me, and also when I have the ball in my hands. A lot of corners and safeties don't want to tackle me, so I know that, and I just use it to my advantage.
When you say, you expect to dominate, is that part of your is that part of the reason you have that confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking to stiff-arm people to the dirt, for sure.
Here is the scouting report from NFL.com on Tillman. He was projected to go in the second round, went to the third. The comp is Michael Pittman. Highly competitive wideout with enticing blend of size, skill, and toughness that fits what teams are looking for as an NFL starter. Monster in 2021. Last year, suffered a high ankle sprain and really was not quite right. Scott, when you look at that comp to Michael Pittman, that's a big physical wide receiver. I get what the Browns are thinking with Tillman. The question is, can he get back to where he was after that high ankle? He just wasn't quite right most of last year.
Yeah, I think he had surgery on it, so you would expect him to be back to normal given the offseason. And he said he feels good. So when it comes to the size, Dave, when you look at that, we talked about the top of the rotation. Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones and Elijah Moore and Marquise Goodwin. He would be the biggest of all those guys, or he is the biggest of all those guys, right? So I think when you have that, it's an added dimension. And Andrew Berry talked before the draft of kind of piecing all these skill sets together to make a well-rounded receiving core. And I think Tillman adds to that, certainly. 6'3", that's big, and he still runs pretty well at 4.5. I think the note about playing well against Alabama and Georgia is really impressive. It jumps off the page to me. 2 of the best teams, if not the 2 best teams in college football. And he didn't shrink, and he had monster days. I think he had 200 yards against Georgia in 2021. So all those things jump out at you, and we talk about succession plans. Donovan Peoples-Jones is entering the final year of his rookie contract. I don't think you have to connect too many dots to think, okay, maybe Tillman can take over for him next year.
Yeah, and NFL bloodlines. Dad was an NFL player, and 6'3", that size screams red zone target. You can be sure Deshaun Watson's smiling about that. The second of the 3-round picks is intriguing as well. Siaki Ika, kind of guys all over the place with opinions about him, but it's very apparent that defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz likes him a lot.
I got Coach Schwartz right here. He wants to say hi to you. We're very excited to make you a Brown, man. So here's Coach Schwartz, okay?
Man, I'm super happy for you. Love the way you play on tape. You play the game the way it should be played. So we're real excited about having you here. You're not a dump truck anymore now, Boo. You're a Ferrari.
I think he said he wanted you to be a Ferrari. What do you think that means? Or what does that mean to you?
To be honest, I don't know what it means. Hey, I will do whatever he wants me to do. I will be a Ferrari. I'll be a Chevy if you want me to be. You know what I'm saying? But probably just, growing up, becoming a pro. So definitely going to start looking at myself as a Ferrari now.
It means that he no longer has to two-gap. He just has to get up the field and disrupt. Get off the ball, get off the ball, get off the ball, as opposed to just build a stone wall and hold up the offensive line.
And Scott, I absolutely love the answer. He's like, I didn't study for this test, but the point being, Jim Schwartz knows what he's looking for in defensive tackles, and by his reaction, he's not going to say anything bad, but you don't have to be over the top when you're welcoming a guy to the thing, and that was pretty high praise from Jim Schwartz.
Yeah, you're right. I think that reaction is worth noting. If Jim Schwartz did not want Ika, I don't think the Browns would have taken him that high. So I think it was, a consensus. Say, let's go get this guy. Now, like we talked about a little bit before the break, I think it's interesting because, he plays he has played it around 250 pounds or 350 pounds. You just don't think about that as a Ferrari. Now, and you watch him work out at the combine, he's got extra weight on him. It doesn't look like a, slim and trim attacking body, but the Browns saw enough athleticism and a motor, right? In that wide spread out Big 12 where there's a lot of space. They saw him play hard and play long, and they think that can translate. He said he's going to lose a little weight. It'll be interesting. I'm really fascinated to see how he translates and how they use him, because that's a big body for the NFL, and I just don't usually don't think about those guys as attacking up the field.
Yeah, and speaking of big bodies, Ika looks small compared to the guy that the Browns took on the offensive line. Dawand Jones, offensive tackle from Ohio State. Let's take a look at his scouting report. He is 6'8", 374 pounds. Was projected to be a first or second round pick. The comparison, this again by NFL.com, is Trent Brown. Selected in the 4th round. You see massive right tackle, rare length, limited athleticism that impacts his consistency. Defenders accustomed to winning with power will need to switch up their approach against Jones. He's just a big guy. Here's what Andrew Berry saw relative to Dawand Jones.
We think he's a young, talented guy, work in progress like a lot of the guys who come into the league. But it's hard to find someone that has that rare of size and also his movement skills. He was very productive at Ohio State, and we think we have the best offensive line coach. I should say this: we know we have the best offensive line coach in the NFL. So we can't wait to get him in the building and allow Bill and Scott to get their hands on him because we do think he's a lump of clay that we can really develop here. I think a lot of tackles in the NFL, tight ends, or maybe former failed basketball players, and you can definitely see that in Dawand's movement and particularly his feet. So I think that's something that we definitely saw as transferable for him as an athlete.
And there was video of him circulating dunking a basketball back in his high school days. But again, let Bill Callahan see what he can do with a guy that's that big with good feet. There's a lot to work with.
Yeah, I do think that the feet is hugely important, right? I mean, it is for any tackle, but a guy that size, you have to be able to move. And they saw him do it at Ohio State. They saw him do it on the basketball court. That is reason for optimism that he continue to do it in the wide zone scheme that the Browns run. And like Andrew Berry said, there's just not a lot of humans that size. He called them a human orca, right, and a Goliath. And those are good quotes for Andrew Berry. So I think there's a lot to like here. The future of the tackle position, even as a rookie, can he be the swing tackle? Now, there's questions. He left the Senior Bowl after one day. He didn't go through the Ohio State Pro Day. So you got to. I think some people have questioned his motivation, but the Browns tap into it, much like we talked about with the Wills. If they tap into that potential, there's a ton of potential there. And if you start for 2 years at right tackle with Ohio State, you got to be pretty good.
And the thing is if he had the motivation, and he's not around in the 4th round. Let's be honest about it. If he was, those are the reasons he fell. So, the question to him is, do you want to be a pro, and do you want to make a lot of money playing football? Those are the questions that should motivate a young guy.
Yeah, and then that's why there's no problem taking him in the 4th round, right?
Right.
If he doesn't turn out, then that's fine. It's a 4th round pick. If he does turn out, and even if he's a starter for 4 years at some point, right? That's a huge win in the 4th round. So it makes all the sense in the world.
Along those lines, these are the 7 best value picks in the entire 2023 draft, according to the Bleacher Report. And one of those is Dawand Jones, offensive tackle for the Browns. Browns have Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin as starting tackles, so Jones won't be asked to hold a first-string role this year. Knowing how often injuries happen in the NFL, though, it's a definite luxury to have a 6'8", 374-pound, 2-time All-Big Ten blocker on the bench. And, again, if this guy develops, it allows you to move on from guys that have huge price tags. And again, Andrew Berry told you they view the draft through a longer lens. That's what he means. It's not about this year. It's can we develop this guy 2 years, 3 years down the road.
Yeah, it's price tag, it's age, right? Jack Conklin's getting up there. It's depth. Chris Hubbard's no longer on the team. He was your swing tackle, in the recent years past. James Hudson III was that guy last year, and I think struggled some. And I think Jones is going to come in and compete for that swing tackle job right away. At least if I were the Browns, that would be the hope. And, the further hope would be, okay, you have Hudson and Jones. Those are your 2 backup tackles, right? You don't have to go invest in somebody else. They're 2, I think, 4th-round draft picks, both of them, and they'd be cheap. That's like the ideal scenario to have as long as these guys prove that they can play.
Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we continue talking Browns draft. We'll also take a look at some free agents, some names the Browns were interested in signing with other teams. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. So the Browns did draft a young edge rusher. Name was attached to the Browns in pre-draft stuff. Isaiah McGuire from Missouri. Andrew Berry talked about what he saw and liked with McGuire.
I think all that has to be played out. I think particularly on the lines, it is tough for rookies to transition into the NFL on both sides of the ball. But I'm not going to limit any player that comes in. If the individual earns a role, they earn the role. So it's just got to play out on the grass, to be honest. Isaiah, I would say it's 2 things. His natural power, both in the run game and pass game, and then also I think he's got what I would call slipperiness as a rusher. Those 2 things combined, we thought allowed him to be highly productive. And then the other thing is with his size and strength, we do think there's probably some inside-outside rush appeal.
And Scott, the versatility I know they like, still seems like they might need one more veteran, long in the tooth, got a year or 2 left, veteran free agent on the edge to me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. As somebody in the Justin Houston, Carlos Dunlap, Melvin Ingram, you've seen those kind of guys sign with teams the last few years. I like that idea a lot. But I like the McGuire pick. And, it's an important position. The Browns place a lot of value at defensive end like they should. And there's question marks behind Myles Garrett and Obo Okoronkwo, right? It's heading into the draft. Alex Wright, last year's 3rd-round pick, one of the 3rd-round picks, is number 3 on the depth chart. And he played 17 games last year and didn't have a quarterback hit. Right, so I think you certainly, if you're the Browns, have to bring in competition for Alex Wright. And McGuire is a young version of that. And then if you go get a veteran guy that can add to the pile, all the better. But I like McGuire. I like his highlight film. I like his size. I think he's a captain at Missouri, and I think he can come in and assume, depending on who else they sign or add, I think he competes with Alex Wright right away to be that 3rd end.
Yeah, without question. I would think you are correct. This from the Bleacher Report. Hot takes, predictions for Browns rookies after the 2023 NFL Draft. So they start with Siaki Ika will become a starter before the end of the season. Cedric Tillman will rank 3rd on the team in receiving touchdowns. And the guy we just talked about, Isaiah McGuire, will carve out a role and notch 4 sacks. And, Scott, if those 3 things happen, that's a heck of a draft, not having a 1st or 2nd round pick.
Yeah, those are interesting. To me, the McGuire one seems the most realistic to me. We talked about the guys in front of Tillman, and you add David Njoku to that mix. Even Nick Chubb catching the ball out of the backfield. They signed tight end Jordan Akins. If he was 3rd on the team in touchdown catches, I get it, he's a big red zone target, but that would be a huge positive sign for Tillman, and I think it would make that pick obviously a big success. Elijah Moore might not be thrilled about that. And then as far as Ika, to me, it all comes down to their vision for him, right? They signed Dalvin Tomlinson to that huge free agent contract, right? 4 years, $57 million. He was a signature signee. And he's 317 pounds. So do they feel like they're going to go 2 guys that big together in the starting lineup? Maybe they do. But if they don't, then, I can't, if Ika replaces Tomlinson, then that's a bad sign. So it depends on how Schwartz wants to use those guys. Yeah, could you see him taking over for Jordan Elliott? That wouldn't stun me, but they're just 2 different types of players.
Yeah. And it's interesting. If they play Tomlinson and Ika together, do you have to double team one of them?
I think it created a lot of problems, and I say he's different than Elliott, and that's without having seen him live in person, right? And just thinking from a body perspective, he just looks different, right? He looks like that 2-gapper that Andrew Berry said he wouldn't have to be anymore. I guess maybe I'm just going to be a slow convert, and I need to see him on the field in really good shape, exploding up the field. And if that happens, then, I think the combination of him and Tomlinson is interesting.
Yeah, no, you're a guy that's watched a lot of Browns football and wants to see it on the field before you say, yeah, let's I get it. A couple of undrafted free agents that the Browns signed to keep a listen out for. First of all, Hassan Hall, and he gets a little bit more than the normal guaranteed at $125. That's a running back from Georgia Tech. They did not draft a running back. You would assume there would be a guy that could make his way onto the roster via undrafted free agent or a free agent if they go out and sign a veteran. Then another interesting one, former Utah edge rusher Mahmoud Diabate signs with the Browns, deal that includes $250,000 guaranteed, and that's significantly more. It's agents telling everybody that, so that's the agent kind of beating the drum for him. But I joke around about that. That's a pretty high guarantee for a undrafted free agent.
Yeah, I think it gives him a better shot of sticking around, right? At least on the practice squad. I think he's in competition with Isaiah Thomas, a 7th-round pick a year ago. Certainly. And then just going back to the running back, I was a little surprised they didn't draft one. I think that speaks to the confidence they have in Jerome Ford is the number 2 behind Nick Chubb. And you mentioned a veteran. The question for me now is, do you sign a veteran and bring him into training camp? Or do you just know that there's veterans out there in case there's an injury to one of your top guys? You can always go find someone, right? We see it every year. That might be the position where you see most recognizable names get added during the season and come in and have an impact. So I'm curious to see how Andrew Berry handles that.
Yeah, I agree with you. A name that a lot of people kind of associated with the Browns was Jerick McKinnon. Ian Rappaport reporting that's not likely to happen.
Jerick McKinnon is expected to sign with the Kansas City Chiefs. I would expect that tomorrow because you mentioned the deadline for players not to count against the compensatory pick formula. That is basically 4 p.m. today. So you can agree to whatever you want, but you can't sign until tomorrow if you want to not affect the formula. That is really where they are. So I would expect Jerick McKinnon, potentially even as soon as tomorrow, to land back with the Chiefs. He's 30 years old. very, very productive, coming off one of the most productive years of his career, more than 800 yards from scrimmage, 10 touchdowns, really, really productive.
And again, Scott, that's a guy, because of his pass catching skills, it seemed to make a lot of sense, but not going to happen. The compensatory pick thing, though, is kind of interesting. So you could very well see some veterans added to that defensive line after the 4 o'clock deadline.
Yeah, I'm sure the Browns pay attention to that. It's an under-the-radar factor, right, when you're looking at the free agent classes, but certainly something to be considered.
Scott Patrick and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. We'll also take a look at some draft grades for the Browns. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrack, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. This is kind of a loaded question. Who is the most overrated draft pick the Browns made in this draft? Also, can you name one player each from the AFC North team, Bengals, Steelers, and Ravens, that you are the most concerned with? Thanks.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, I didn't think that any of the guys that they drafted, when you're picking in the 3rd and 4th rounds, I don't think any of them were really overdrafted.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Like if you force me to make a pick, maybe I'd pick Ika just because, like we talked about, I'm trying to kind of envision how he fits. But yeah, I didn't think there was not a pick they made where I said, "Oh man, they reached for this guy." There just wasn't one.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on Ika. As far as guys that concern me, Bengals, that edge rusher from Clemson, Miles Murphy, I liked him. Zay Jones, Zay Flowers. I'm trying to make him like the guy in Buffalo to lessen it. I'm not going to lie and say I watched a lot of Boston College. You look at his highlight film, and I heard the comparison to Tyreek Hill, and I went, ooh, I don't like that with Lamar Jackson. And Joey Porter Jr. would be the Steelers guy.
Yeah, I agree with Flowers and Porter Jr. for sure. Flowers, I'm with you, but I saw those highlights, and he flies. Now, he's like 5'8.5", so, they got to figure out a way to use him. Can you find him downfield? The catch radius isn't as big. But there's a scary element to him combined with Lamar Jackson returning and Odell Beckham Jr. and the other moves the Ravens have made at receiver. And I thought the Steelers were going to take Porter Jr. in the 1st round, and then they wind up trading up, getting in front of the Jets, getting the tackle they want, and then are able to get Porter Jr. at the top of the 2nd round. So I really like that. And the Bengals, I think the Bengals took a tight end. Who it is escaping me, but I like that because they're just adding to the pile of receivers or targets for Joe Burrow, and we know that, I don't know how long they can keep those guys besides Jamar Chase, right? Higgins and Boyd, I think, are going to leave eventually. You got to find other guys to catch the ball.
Yep, I hear you. I'm always concerned with how you're going to block somebody that has some skill at the edge. Pete Prisco from CBS Sports draft grades for the Browns. Prisco goes with a B+. Best pick, he likes 3rd round pick Siaki Ika from Baylor, big, powerful man that will help their run defense in a big way. He is also better at pushing the pocket than people think. Needs to keep his weight in check. Worst pick, their worst pick could end up being their best. How's that? 4th round pick, Dawand Jones. If he can get his weight down, he can be a quality starter. If not, major bust. And again, that probably comes with the footwork and all that you're working with Jones.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if he can be a major bust, taking where they took him, right? But I'll tell you what, Pete Prisco, he's a tough grader. So for him to give the Browns a B+, that's pretty high on his scale.
Yeah, and it's interesting again. The opinions on Ika seem to be all over the board. I guess if you're that big and you can get it. Big 12 throws the ball. They spread everybody out. They throw the ball. So if you can show up in that style, playing that style of offense, I'm guessing they see something they really like there.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I do, and I think that contributed to the Browns liking Ika as much as they did. It's probably superficial, but it's just from a body standpoint, right? You see him on film. He walks into the room. He reminds you of Danny Shelton, right?
Yeah.
And Danny's had a long career. Yep. The Browns took him too high, right? He probably wasn't worth the 12th pick in the draft, and they took him there. And this is 2 rounds later, or 3 rounds later, or 2 rounds later. And it just makes more sense, right? But you see that guy and you think, well, okay, he's a 1 and 2 down guy. And it feels like the Browns forecast more from Ika. And I just don't know if that's a realistic ask.
It's funny. You mentioned that. That's his comp on the NFL.com scouting report. And I think that's one of the things that I was like, oh, I've seen Dan. You know what I mean? I've seen Danny Shelton, and I don't mind Danny Shelton, but I don't want Danny Shelton for the Browns right now. I want somebody that's more of a rotational guy. And I think that's one of the things that kind of soured me on Ika. You look at his tape, and there's some, and again, highlight tapes. I don't sit here and watch entire Baylor football games. I'll be honest about that. What I've seen is at least intriguing.
Yeah, I get that. There's certainly an explosive element there that the Browns are looking for and that he provides. It's just a matter of, I guess, funneling that in the right direction and making the most out of it that you can. All
right. This is from NFL.com, post-draft NFL power rankings. Chiefs 1, Eagles 2, Bengals 3, Bills 4. They have the Browns down at 21. Browns had a smart, sensible draft. But when it comes to this franchise, the focus continues to hang over the quarterback position. The steady drumbeat of drama following Watson can cloud the fact that the Browns have an intriguing roster that makes them potential bounce-back candidates in the AFC. If Watson gets his game back, Cleveland is going to surprise people. I guess the national narrative is a little different. If Watson doesn't get his game back, we're in for another rebuild here, I think.
Yeah, you're completely right. But that's what hangs over everything. And we've talked about it a million times, but there's a reason we talk about it so much because it matters so much is how Deshaun Watson plays, right? We see the Ravens bring back Lamar Jackson. You see the Jets add Aaron Rodgers. That adds to the Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence and Russell Wilson, and I'm sure I'm forgetting guys. And how does he play? How does he stack up? I think the rest of the Browns roster is competitive with those teams, but so much comes down to how the quarterback plays, and that's why the pressure is on Watson to play like he did in 2020. And if he doesn't, it's going to be a struggle, and we could have, massive changes. I just think that's a reality. 21 feels a little low to me, though.
Yeah, I would agree. If you told me 14, 15, I probably would have said, okay, I get it. Here's the other thing, though. Think about, and I completely understand why Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski went for the trade. Think if you are a team that needed a quarterback, and this draft is like the one where the Browns took Baker Mayfield. There's 5 guys, and one of them is going to be really good, and one of them is going to be okay, and 2 of them aren't going to be any good, and they could be any one of the 5.
No, you're exactly right. And, we're not going to know how the trade plays out until Watson either succeeds or fails. And then it'll be really easy, to say if the trade was a winner or loser. But right now, if he doesn't, right, if Watson doesn't live up to his billing and the trade, all the value the Browns gave up for him, then you can say, hey, they could have found a quarterback a different way, right? Derek Carr becomes a free agent, Aaron Rodgers, whoever, right? There's a bunch of guys out there, this draft class, next draft class, whatever it is. If he does turn out to be the guy you think he is, then none of that matters, right? None of the draft picks you gave up, none of the money you're paying him doesn't matter because he's so good. And that's the evaluation the Browns made, that he was their best bet to solve what they felt like was a big quarterback problem and a big quarterback question. And, you know, I can't argue with that because last year I didn't think any quarterbacks in the draft were worthwhile. Free agency is kind of a crapshoot. But if it doesn't work, you can always say, hey, maybe they would have been in the running for Anthony Richardson or maybe C.J. Stroud, whatever it is. You know, there's always going to be options, but I understand why the Browns did what they did at the time.
Scott Petrak, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, as always, great stuff. Make sure you check him out, brownzone.com on the internet. You can also read him in the pages of the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. This from the 33rd team. That's a group of former NFL executives, scouts, personnel people. 9 biggest steals of the NFL draft, and third round, pick 74, Cedric Tillman for the Browns. You see also on that list Will Levis, Joey Porter Jr., Michael McGuire, Jalen Hyatt, who went a pick before him, Tucker Kraft, among others. With that, let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Tim, I know a lot of Browns fans wanted Jalen Hyatt, who it appears the Giants traded up to make sure the Browns couldn't take. Tillman might have been their guy all along, though. This is a guy that was projected to go second round, might have even been higher if he hadn't been hurt most of last season.
Yeah, I mean, going into that 2022 season, you could argue that he was Tennessee's best receiver. I mean, he just come off a 1,000-yard season for the Volunteers. I think it was 12 touchdowns he had that year. And then, 2022, he gets hurt, has that high ankle sprain, misses 6 games, has surgery on it. And that kind of opened the door for Jalen Hyatt to essentially become Jalen Hyatt and become the player he is. So I think in that way, a lot of people kind of forgot about Cedric Tillman, outside of the draft experts, those guys that still had him in the second round. He's such a different player from Jalen Hyatt. Looking at his measurables, his height, weight, some of the ways he plays, similar to T. Higgins of the Bengals. Now, if he can become anywhere close to what T. Higgins is, this is a steal of a pick. But I think what the Browns are hoping for is a guy who can play the perimeter, can win those 50-50 balls. He's got height. He's got incredible hands. Maybe one day he takes over a starting job from Amari Cooper or Donovan Peoples-Jones. If they're not with the team in the next year or two, maybe he takes one of their jobs. But I think, there's a lot to like about Tillman. I think we all kind of latched onto the idea that if they were going receiver, they were going with the speed receiver. So it's kind of interesting that they went for Tillman. Also, the fact that he was 23 years old. And, we've talked so long about the age guardrails that I think, Tillman was kind of a player, at least for Browns fans, that kind of slipped through the cracks there.
Yeah, and I'm with you. 6'3", 215, 213, whatever it is. That's a guy you split him out and you get a smaller cornerback on him and he catches contested balls. That screams red zone target. That's something the Browns definitely can use. Second, third round pick, Siaki Ika talked about playing with Myles Garrett.
He hasn't reached out, but I'm looking forward to when he does. He don't know this, but he's going to be my best friend. So that's my goal as of right now. To be best friends with Myles. But I'm real excited to play with him.
Dalvin Tomlinson, is he a guy you've watched in the past or studied at all?
Oh, yeah. More just recently. Once I figured out that I'm coming here trying to get try to, know the other players here. So I'm excited. Like I said earlier, excited to get in and help stop the run, and I feel like me and him can do it.
And Tim, Ika's an engaging guy. I mean, it was a couple minutes of his thing, and it's like, okay, I see what they like. The thing that was really impressive, I said earlier, though, Jim Schwartz, the call when they told him he was picked, the enthusiasm Schwartz had isn't something he's going to manufacture.
Yeah, and obviously, this feels like a Jim Schwartz influence pick. And I think, when you have the cloud of a defensive coordinator like Jim Schwartz and the reputation he has, you let him have a couple guys that he goes for. Ika was a guy I was initially liked way back at the beginning of the process, but as it went along, he did not test well the combine. He was a guy that kind of slid for me a little bit, but I 100% see why the Browns picked him. I mean, a big guy, 335 pounds, probably could even slim down, get into the low 330s or even the 320s, depending on what the Browns want. But I mean, you cannot ignore the emphasis that Andrew Berry has put on that defensive tackle position. I mean, in the last 2 months alone, they've added almost 650 pounds of football players with Ika and Dalvin Tomlinson. And we know how small the Browns defensive tackles were last year, how easily they got pushed around the run game. With those two guys in there, it'll be much tougher to push them and create those running lanes that we see him do. Ika, I think, I've said before, defensive tackles are going to take a while to really adjust because he's got to learn, going up against grown men who are probably stronger than he is, more athletic than he's used to seeing on a daily basis. So I wouldn't expect too much out of him just because, again, it's a hard position to adjust to. But, he'll be playing between some guys who have been there, done that, like Myles Garrett and Dalvin Tomlinson, like you said, and it seems like he's got the right attitude for what he's stepping into.
So this is from CBSSports.com from Ryan Wilson, their national football writer. 2023 NFL Draft home runs and head scratchers from day 3. So picks that Wilson likes: Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He improved each and every year, which led to him completing nearly 70% of his passes at UCLA this past season. Ends up in a good situation in Cleveland where he should challenge backups Joshua Dobbs and Kellen Mond during training camp. Picks that he didn't like: Dawand Jones, and he says, will he be motivated? Skipped out on participating at Ohio State's Pro Day, which included not weighing in after coming in at 374 at the NFL Combine. In addition to needing to keeping his weight under control, doesn't look comfortable blocking at the second level. Sometimes struggles against smaller speed pass rushers who can duck underneath him around the edge. Let's start with the quarterback. That was a quarterback who was attached to the Browns in a lot of mock drafts. I don't know about challenging Joshua Dobbs, but he's a developmental guy, and the Browns need a developmental guy at quarterback.
Yeah, and I mean, I wrote about this on Saturday. I thought this was a great fit, as far as player and scheme and quarterback. He was eventually going to back up as far as, what DTR was going to bring to the Browns. This is a guy I've watched a lot of college football over the years. Seems like Dorian Thompson-Robinson's been playing forever, and it's because he kind of has 50 games under his belt, 48 career starts. Coming off his best season, UCLA, obviously, they upped up the amount of throws he had. I think it was almost about 100 more attempts than he had a year ago. The completion percentage went up, the touchdowns went up, the interceptions went up, and I think that's due in part to the fact that his attempts went up. So this is a guy who's obviously got a lot of good tools to work with. He's mobile. It seems like he processes really well. And the thing I like the most when you watch his film, he puts the ball in a great spot for his receivers. And I think that's an underrated tool, I think, for a quarterback. Is you can have the arm strength, you can have the accuracy, but you got to know where the receiver wants the ball to be. And it seems like Thompson-Robinson knows how to do that. Obviously, I think third string maybe this year for him. Maybe in a year or two he becomes the full-time backup. Maybe someday you flip him for an asset. Maybe he's like a Chase Daniel guy you keep around for a decade or something like that. But again, in a pinch where Deshaun Watson gets hurt and in a game and Thompson Robinson has to step into it, at least you don't have to change too much about the offense. And that's why I thought it was a smart decision that not only do you go for developmental quarterback but get this guy in particular.
Yeah, a lot of the same skill sets that Josh Dobbs has. Obviously not to the level of Deshaun Watson, but the same kind of skills. As far as Jones goes, I love the pick. I have no issue with it at all. It's a fourth-round pick. If he was motivated and his weight was under control, he'd have been gone in the second round.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was listening to our Orange and Brown Talk podcast yesterday, and Doug Lemerise was on. He was talking about how Dawand Jones kind of mismanaged the pre-draft process in a lot of areas, and I think this was one of them. And maybe by not doing it, in some ways, the pre-draft process is like your first job interview. It's a 3-month-long job interview where you're pitching yourself out to all 32 teams, the general managers, the coaches, the scouts, you name it. They're the ones watching kind of every move you make, looking for reasons to either take you or not to take you. And I mean, just purely on film alone, just the fact that he moves well at 374 pounds tells you he should have gone way higher than 111th overall. So, I mean, I think this is a case of, a player who it just kind of didn't work out for him in the pre-draft process, a tough weekend for him. I think, like you said, second round potential, certainly he might have even a shot to sneak in the first round. You get him early in the fourth round. I mean, I don't know how you can question that pick. I mean, again, it's a fourth round pick. I mean, it doesn't mean as much as a 2 or a 3. Guys who are fourth round picks bust all the time. I mean, the hit rate for those guys is very low because, when you're picking at that spot in the draft, guys have certain flaws, and it's up to those teams to either fix those flaws or bring the rest of their game up and put them in a position where those flaws don't matter as much.
And the other thing is, keep in mind, 20-something guy, let's hope he learned from what he did during the pre-draft. Don't do that again. Get it corrected. Get back to what you have done on the football field and listen to Bill Callahan, and you could very well make yourself a whole lot of money.
Question about. I mean, obviously, coming to a situation where we don't know when he's going to play, when we don't know he's going to be needed. But if you want to get a guy coached up as an offensive lineman, few guys is better to learn from than Bill Callahan, guy who's coached so many guys in the NFL. We've seen what he's done for this Browns offensive line for the last few years. This could be a good spot for Jones to learn, and maybe eventually he takes over a tackle spot in 2 years or so.
Tim Bielek and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery, Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielek from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. Great show. This is Howard from Marin County. I just wanted to say that very concerned that the Browns will basically again be at the bottom in the division of the Lamar going back to Baltimore and Joe Burrow, and I think Kenny Pickett is just, I have no faith in the upper management of the Browns. So I predict that they will have a worse season than they had this year, and I predict they'll have less than 7 wins. So that's about it. Thanks again. Have a nice day. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tim, boy, I hope he's not correct, because if this team wins 7 games, we're going to be looking for a head coach and maybe a general manager again. The AFC's loaded, without question. It just is. So Deshaun Watson has to play well.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what they're paying him $230 million to do. That's what they gave up 6 draft picks for him to do, is to play well now with, a full off season with, extra weapons added, Elijah Moore, Marquise Goodwin, Jordan Akins, and now Cedric Tillman. There's no excuses with Deshaun Watson. He's got to look like the Pro Bowler he was in Houston. He's got to look like the guy who, up until, his legal troubles, started popping up, that he was considered to be, up there for the best quarterbacks in the entire NFL, and he could certainly get there. He's got the elite talent. We saw a lot of flashes of it last season. I think part of the issue is, again, rust and, the Browns changing up the way they did their offense in the middle of the season, when the rest of the team had done things a certain way for 11 games and they had to do it a different way for the final 6. Now that they're going to be on the same page for an entire spring, an entire training camp, it should be smoother. Watson should have the rust knocked off by now. And you would hope that, you would hope in this case that he can return to that kind of player. And if he does, they're not finishing dead last. They're going to win, I would imagine, at least 10, 11 games, maybe compete for the division title with the Bengals, possibly. That's a high bar, because Joe Burrow, I think, is as good as anybody in the NFL at quarterback. Deshaun Watson can get there. Joe Burrow is there, and he's got so much more chemistry built up with his receivers and his offense than Deshaun Watson has, and it's just a game of catch-up right now.
Yeah, and I certainly understand the way Howard and fans that think that way are thinking, because the Browns have not been good the last 2 years. And quite frankly, they haven't played as well as I thought they should have relative to the talent on their roster. This from ESPN.com. Biggest post-draft questions for all 32 NFL teams. Did the Browns do enough to solidify their defensive line? Andrew Berry has hinted that the Browns could sign another free agent up front, but the Browns already have up to 6 new players in their defensive line rotation, giving them the pieces to significantly improve at stopping the run. That's true. I think more importantly is, I think Jim Schwartz is going to have a bigger effect. Having said that, I said earlier in the show, I think they need one long-in-the-tooth defensive edge guy that they can bring in, maybe play him 25 snaps a game, have him get 5-6 sacks a season, and then they're ready to go.
Yeah, if they do that, I think then you're kind of set. I still think, one more free agent defensive tackle would work as well, but like Al Woods, obviously there was all this stuff about, he came to Cleveland for a visit, but there was no contract offered. So who knows if that happens, and if it does, when it happens. Maybe it's something, if it happens, it comes closer to training camp in that situation. But, free agent guys like Frank Clark was a name that, keeps coming up. That would be a lot. He'd have to take a significant pay cut, I think, to fill into that role for the Browns, but I think he's still got a little something left in the tank. But I think there's still plenty of good defensive ends still available in free agency. Right now, you obviously have Myles Garrett, Obo Okoronkwo. You've got, half a season of legitimate high-level NFL production as a starter. I can understand, kind of wanting to see more of it before you're willing to kind of hand him the keys as a starter full-time. Then you got Alex Wright, who came into the NFL raw and showed that he was raw as a rookie, never really had any production in the past game. You got a rookie in Isaiah McGuire, who I really like, but you got coach is going to have to work with him technically to get him up to the level he needs to be as a potential starter down the road. So it wouldn't make sense to add another veteran body in there, a guy who's done it, preferably, I'm sure, for the Browns at a higher level, and, a borderline starter level, a guy who can, be that first guy off the bench, especially to take some of that pressure off of McGuire and Wright.
Yeah, I would agree. How big of a deal do you think it is that Schwartz is here? I think he kind of elevates things. I think that's what the Browns are counting on.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a pedigree for, everywhere he's been, particularly stops in Tennessee and Philadelphia. I mean, those defenses have been tremendous. They're built on pass rush. He knows what you need to cook up a good pass rush, especially in the defensive front. We know, if you have a dominant defensive line, you can really control football games more so than any other area outside of having an elite quarterback, really. And I mean, we saw, particularly the Eagles got to the Super Bowl on the back of an amazing defensive line. I think he had like 70 sacks last season, which is absolutely absurd if you think about it. And the Browns, if you compare them to the Eagles, obviously, the Browns have a comparable top-end talent, but after that, the depth is nowhere close. So it's going to be up to Schwartz and the Browns that keep identifying guys, try and get these young players developed into what he needs them to be, because if they're going to go where they need to go, it's going to be on these young defensive ends to really play up to a higher standard and to, do the things he needs to do, because as we know, he's a guy who likes building his defenses around fronts that create pressure with just 4 guys. He doesn't like to blitz a lot. So he's going to need to, Browns really need those young defensive ends to really step up this season.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out. Pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.